right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Wednesday, June 22nd. It is 9:31 a.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow colleagues. With me today are Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, Board Member Nicole Morgan, Board Member Sean McGuire, and Board Member Laurel Firestone. With us today as well is Eileen Sobek, our Executive Director, Jonathan Bishop, a Chief Deputy, Michael Lawfer, our Chief Counsel. Our Clerk of the Board is Janine Townsend, and assisting her today are Courtney Tyler and Margie Argel. As you can see, this meeting is being webcast and recorded, and it's also a hybrid meeting. We have both an in-person component here and a virtual component. For those of you joining virtually, you're either watching through our customary webcast on the Cali PA website or YouTube Live, or you are commenting on today's workshop and on the Zoom platform. If you are on any one of those other platforms and are looking to comment, there are instructions at the top of today's agenda on how to get onto the Zoom meeting platform. But if you're having challenges, please do email the clerk of the board at comment letters at waterboards.ca.gov, and she'll help get you onto the platform here. Once on the platform, your cameras will be off, your microphones will be muted until it's your turn to speak on the item that you've indicated you wish to do so. For those in the room, let's quickly do emergency evacuation procedures. Please identify the nearest exit. If there is an emergency, an alarm will go off, and we will calmly file out to Cesar Chavez Plaza and wait further instruction. Additionally, if you are seeking to speak on any item today, Mr. Bothwell, you can sign up in person here on the side table, and there are instructions there on how to do so. With that being said, we can move on to, I believe, our only item today, and which is consideration of adoption of the proposed statewide municipal stormwater permit and time schedule order for the California Department of Transportation. And I'll hand it over to our incredible colleagues in the program.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Chair Esquivel and board members. I'm Mary Boyd. I'm the project manager for this permit, and I'm with the Division of Water Quality, the Municipal Stormwater Unit. We would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the State Water Board and Regional Water Board staff for their work on this project. Diana Messina, our State Water Board Surface Water Permitting Section Manager. Leo Cosentini, Sheena Dillon, Paul Levy, Flora Liu, and Nick Wong with the State Water Board Municipal Stormwater. The Regional Water Board Subcommittee and Liaisons, Tom Mumley and Jenny Newman. State Water Board staff, Ryan Mallory Jones and Catherine Hagan with our Office of Chief Counsel, and Naomi Rubin and Wendy Wiles with our Office of Enforcement. Next slide, please. Here's the overview of our presentation. First, I'm going to touch on the public process. Next, I'll give an overview of the permit development process. Third, I'll highlight the proposed changes based on public comments. Then I'll highlight where those changes were made into the permit. And I'll also touch on the change in the time schedule order. Next slide, please. Public outreach was a long process. It started in 2018. And throughout development, staff conducted initial stakeholder outreach, held 3 staff-level public workshops, and developed the draft permit. We also held numerous meetings with the responsible party. Staff released an informal draft in April 2020. And that was released to the United States Environmental Protection Agency and to our Office of Enforcement. The informal draft helped to improve the draft permit. The release of the draft permit kicked off the public comment period. The board hearing on the draft permit was on July 20th, 2021. The public comment period was from June 25th through August 27th, 2021, and that was a 60-day public comment period. Staff continued to hold focused meetings while responding to the comments and developing the proposed permit. Next slide, please. We developed the proposed permit between September 2021 and May 2022. We issued the public notice for the proposed permit and time schedule order on May 20th, 2022. We held the staff level workshop on June 2nd, just a few weeks ago, and today, June 22nd, we're here at the board meeting where the board will consider adoption of the proposed permit and time schedule order. Next slide, please. This is an overview of our permit development priorities. We focused on cost of compliance. We considered the cost of compliance that is, we aligned requirements with the existing department's programs. We simplified and clarified the total maximum daily load requirements and the demonstration of compliance with total maximum daily loads. And we streamlined the monitoring requirements. The major changes from the existing permit include the following. We placed TMDL requirements in a time schedule order. We added new requirements to implement the statewide trash provisions. We added laboratory analysis to meet sufficiently sensitive methods and labs to have environmental laboratory accreditation program certification for the specified analysis. We added electronic reporting to our statewide database, the Stormwater Multiple Applications and Reporting System, which we refer to as SMARTS. Next slide, please. This is just a quick overview of how the permit is structured. We have the main order, which is followed by 7 attachments. Attachment A is the fact sheet. B is acronyms and definitions. C is the stormwater management plan requirements. D is the total maximum daily load implementation requirements. E is the trash implementation requirements. F is the monitoring requirements. And G is a summary of all the reporting requirements. Today, we'll highlight the significant changes to attachments B, C, D, E, F, and G. We'll also highlight a change in the proposed time schedule order. Next slide, please. On the next few slides, I'll describe how the major changes have been incorporated into the proposed permit. And these are the major changes based on the public comments. Next slide, please. Attachment B is the acronyms and definitions. We clarified a definition. We clarified the definition of cooperative agreements. This was based on multiple comments in a variety of letters. We clarified the definition of cooperative agreements. These are agreements with other agencies and parties to implement projects. The agreements are either within or outside the department's right-of-way that result in or progress towards compliance with TMDLs. The agreements are for the implementation of cooperative projects that either alone or in combination with other dischargers projects in this watershed are consistent with complying with the department's waste load allocations for the water body. Next slide, please. Going on to attachment C, the revised stormwater management plan requirements. For this section, we added a 30-day public comment period for the areas of special biological significance compliance plan. For the department's inspections reports, we added a requirement to conclude the date, time, and place of inspection, the inspector's name, photos, inspection results, and submittal within 60 days. We also added a requirement for the department to report when its contractor had not obtained required coverage under the construction general permit. Next slide, please. Continuing on with attachment C. We revised the reporting for the cost of compliance, and we made this consistent with the State Water Board guidance on this particular topic. We revised reporting for fiscal planning and strategy and annual fiscal analysis reports. New requirements include an inventory, methods to prioritize and schedule maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement. And we also included requirements to identify the current performance level of each asset, a cost forecast for rehab and replacement, and adaptation strategies for climate change. We updated the asset management plan. We added an inventory of assets such as structural stormwater controls, and we also added key personnel. We added a new requirement for a retrofit plan. The department must create a prioritized list of best management practices. The list is for retrofitting. The department must evaluate best management practices for age, deferred maintenance, inadequate stormwater treatment, and high risk for failure. Actual retrofits are then phased in over the term of the permit. And then the annual report was updated to include reporting of progress and the status of the annual retrofit projects. Next slide, please. Going on to attachment D. This is the TMDL implementation requirements section. We made the following revisions. We included a 30-day comment period for the prioritized inventory of reaches, for the TMDL compliance plan, and for the annual updates of the TMDL compliance plan. We made 2 strategies for demonstration of TMDL compliance. We clarified that the modeling strategy must quantitatively demonstrate that the best management practices reduces pollutant loads. And we added that demonstration of compliance may also be shown through other factors as described in a specific TMDL. Next slide, please. Going on to attachment E. This is the trash implementation requirements. We made clarifications to the trash implementation requirements. We clarified that the certified full capture system includes both trash treatment control devices and multi-benefit treatment systems. While installation of other treatment controls that are not certified full capture systems will not satisfy the requirements themselves, they may be considered as part of an approach to achieve full capture system equivalency. We made clarifications to the trash assessment methodology. The department has to assess its right-of-ways through municipalities regardless of the population. And we require that technical details be included where visual methods will be substituted for a non-visual method, such as a statistical analysis being substituted for actual visual inspection of the right-of-way. Next slide, please. We added this provision for certain cases. If the department documents that it's infeasible to implement trash controls in the right-of-way, then the department may propose to implement equivalent trash controls outside of the right-of-way in a location that has significant trash generation. Next slide, please. We revised the milestones for the trash implementation requirements. The first milestone remains unchanged. 35% of or more of the original acres identified in the department's trash implementation plan. The second milestone has been revised to 70% or more of the following: the acres identified in the department's trash implementation plan, plus the acres identified in the department's revised trash assessment map. The final deadline has been revised somewhat. The department is required to achieve full capture system equivalency at 100% of the acres identified as significant trash generating areas as identified in the department's revised trash assessment map. Next slide, please. We had one revision to the proposed time schedule order. The original was a 3-year annual milestone, and we changed it to a calculation for a 4-year annual milestone. Next slide, please. We have 2 State Water Board actions here today. We have consideration of adoption of the permit with the late revisions in change sheet number 1. And if the proposed permit is adopted, consideration of adoption of the proposed time schedule order. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your consideration. We listed here some relevant links. Our main webpage for the Caltrans permit and other program issues are shown up here. The trash implementation webpage is also shown here. And the cost of compliance guidance that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's a link to that here. So thank you very much for your attention.
Just thank you. Yesterday we heard how our storms program is really trying to turn what is often a liability here through our permits into a real resource. And we know that trash and here the impairment of the use of that water is really important to address. And so I want to also here thank you all for, I know what has been a lot of good conversation and balancing when it comes to the approaches and really trying to ensure that this permit is as effective as it can be. And I just want to thank as well the Department of Transportation, Caltrans, for being real strong partners in that as well. And here really helping us, again, hone in on how we address these challenges of trash and here the impairment of the usage of stormwater from our freeways and this incredible landscape that we've made across the state. And again, it's source control. It's having the features in place and making the investments that really continue to reconnect the drops and the hydrology in a way that here is protecting water quality and again helping make it a resource that municipalities and communities can really rely on as a new and innovative source of water. So just at the top, just really I know it's been a lot of great work on all sides with the agencies to really come up with the right balance. And here, as we tackle stormwater and other venues, whether it's MS4s or other permits, I think this can help continue to create a model for the right way to be engaged and here productive around not unchallenging issues and costly. And when it comes to really being able to ensure that, again, this is a resource that we can rely and use. I don't have any questions off the top. I know we have about 4 commenters and would look to my fellow board colleagues if they have anything they'd like to say or clarify here before we hear from our commenters. Okay, hearing none, then let's get to our first commenter. And I believe we have Izzy Coy from Monterey Coastkeeper going first. Okay, we'll go ahead and lead with Sean Bothwell, who did come all this way. Oh, I forgot, and apologies, there are panels here. There's actual, an order I'm supposed to be following. Good to have you with us, Mr. Bothwell.
Good to be here.
Virtually yesterday, in person today. I really appreciate it all.
Changing it up for you. And yeah, Izzy's going to be the second person presenting today, but good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. It's great to be back. It seems like kind of a dream. It's been a while since I've been in here. Sean Bothwell, though, Executive Director for California Coastkeeper Alliance. With me today is Izzy Coy, who's going to be representing Monterey Coastkeeper, and then Megan Kahn with Sonoma County Conservation Action was going to speak on the pesticide stuff and couldn't make it at the last second, so we're going to just fill in, but we'll try to keep the time to a minimum. I want to echo Chair Esquivel, your thanks to staff. It was, usually I don't actually take the time because I usually don't have the time to thank staff for all their amazing work, but this permit in particular, I felt they were incredibly thoughtful. Even just the response to comments was incredibly nice to like have really thoughtful responses, even if we didn't get what we want. Like it was a really great job, and I really appreciate it. And also to Caltrans, I was here for the 2012 permit, and it seems like the kind of tone and the change has been amazing, where they seemed a lot more cooperative and really wanting to do the right thing. So I was really appreciative of the Caltrans kind of change in that respect. Just a couple things that improvements that have been made that I just want to highlight. I'm really appreciative. Certainly the new TMDL system, moving away from the credits and to traditional effluent limits, was super appreciated. We were concerned about that back in 2012. We tried to limit it as much as we could, but ultimately, we think this way is the right approach. Areas of special biological significance. I've talked before in the Ocean Triangle Review about fixing the ASBS general exception, but I know there's a lot of stuff on your plate, and so I really appreciate this being an interim fix, particularly for Caltrans, requiring them to finish their compliance plan, to put BMPs actually in the ground, and then maybe most importantly, actually doing some back-end modeling or monitoring to demonstrate that they're now in compliance, I think was a really big fix there. The picking up trash on our right-of-ways before mowing seems kind of like a simple little ask, but it was a really important thing for our water keepers. It's incredibly frustrating to be going out trying to pick up trash, but then see it's mowed and it's now smaller and it's airborne. And so we really appreciate that being part of this permit. And then lastly, the improvements in the site inspections that was just raised was a recent addition that we really appreciate, because we felt like the site inspection reports in the past were really lacking and kind of just boilerplate language, and this feels like there's actually some there, and so we really appreciate it. The issues I'm just going to cover today, I do want to make a small apology because they are some fairly new topics that have been brought to our attention since the last comment period. Usually I like to start broad and kind of whittle down to the small remaining issues, but these are some of the topics that got brought up since the comments and relatively soon. And the last one took 10 years, and so I just feel like we have to at least flag these issues, even though we're kind of late in the process. So next slide, please. So I'm missing a title here, but I wanted to address the cooperative agreements, and I completely agree. And you heard me yesterday. I really think that's the future for stormwater management in California, is really getting these permittees to collaborate more, to share resources. Find areas like, maybe a municipality doesn't have a lot of room for stormwater capture, but maybe a commercial property does have some low-hanging fruit, like really tapping into those benefits. And in this case, this is my sad graphic trying to explain it, but we were recently briefed on the cooperative agreements. I really appreciate the new language that was put in place so that there's things like not double counting and making sure everyone's getting the right credit for their cooperative agreements. And again, I don't want to discourage these at all, but the concern that came up was, and again, I apologize for this, but if Caltrans is discharging at that blue arrow, but the cooperative agreement to address that discharge and the impairment isn't until the red arrow. My concern is we're creating a sacrifice zone between blue and red. And so I don't want to discourage them, but I would like there to be something in the permit that tries to incentivize or encourage folks to do these agreements further up the impaired segment, so that we're getting all of the impaired waterway and not just where the municipality wants to self-select what's best for them. I think in the past, we kind of saw municipalities seeing Caltrans kind of almost as like their piggy bank of like, we're so constrained with Prop 218, but Caltrans has some money, so let's tap into them and build these projects, which again, I want to support completely. But trying to minimize these type of sacrifice zones, because I can only imagine the communities between blue and red, might be those communities that don't have the resources to necessarily do a cooperative agreement with Caltrans. And so that's our request. And if next slide, please. I wasn't able to give you guys a handout like usual because of the ex parte rules, but it's all here in the PowerPoint, the specific language request that we were asking for. But just a simple, hopefully this is a simple nod, trying to explain that having the cooperative agreement project cited as far up the watershed's impairment as possible, just to prevent those sacrifice zones. Next slide, please.
Before you actually continue, Mr. Bothwell, especially because I think we have the time, what is the feeling from folks on a recommendation on that? I think it's reasonable. don't see it as, but just want to see what the appetite is or any initial concern,
So
just for consideration.
I'll give a quick high level, and then our attorneys may want to chime in also on that. So first, the way I see this, and Sean can correct me, is that this is a attempt to make sure that we think about where the location of it is. And because the cooperative agreements need to go through the regional boards as part of the process, I believe that's already going to be in the consideration. And so I'm not sure it's necessary, but I do want to give our legal counsel a chance to weigh in, because we just haven't had a time to confirm.
To really, yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think piggybacking on everything John said, agree. I think we would want some more time to discuss exactly what we think of this kind of thing. I know some of the thoughts that occurred to us are partly that, these cooperative agreements, to the extent that they are involving, watershed partners, watershed projects, and ideally, a watershed approach towards addressing impairments, is that the cooperative agreements may involve projects that aren't necessarily treating Caltrans's discharge, because they may be contributing to a whole watershed or impaired segment water body approach. And so some of them are going to address maybe other municipalities, some should address Caltrans. So we'd want to be careful, I think, just not to unintentionally restrict their flexibility to enter into these cooperative projects. And just, again, everything John said, and adding that one of the changes we made that Mary highlighted was that these plans, the TMDL compliance plans, will be going through, now since the comment period, a 30-day public notice and comment period. And as part of those plans, Caltrans needs to demonstrate how their approach is consistent with actually achieving the waste allocations for the watershed. So what our anticipation would be that, to the extent that we have, concerns about sort of missed areas exist, that those things would hem those in and address the whole water body. And yeah, and ultimately the idea of the TMDL compliance plan, the end point of the compliance plan, is that they have to show that they're complying with waste allocations, and those are expressed in a lot of different ways depending on the TMDL. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate entertaining the discussion here, and especially the language says should. So again, I think it's trying to preserve our flexibility with some of that, but it's an important consideration. I appreciate the flag, Mr. Bothwell.
And can I just build on that, just for staff to think about during this is, I don't know if this is the right language or the right place, but I do think making sure that we're flagging where there might be, what is called here sacrifice zones, or areas that may disproportionately impact communities, or create hotspots that impact populations, and obviously particularly paying attention to racial equity concerns. Again, I know that we can and will do that, but I think to the extent we can find language to call that out, that provides within the needs and goals of the program, it'd be great to figure out what that language is.
So I was remiss in saying one thing right up at the top. This is part of the TMDL, and the TMDL means to address impaired water bodies. And if the compliance plan doesn't address the impaired water body, it's not going to make it through the whole process. So you can't essentially say, this is an extreme example, but that we're going to do all of our treatment at the end of the water body right before it reaches the ocean. And at that point, we're going to meet all water quality standards, and then the whole 400 miles above that is irrelevant. That just the water body needs to be in compliance. So yes, you can weigh between areas where you have huge or larger sources to address them that may be not at the very top of the water body, but are causing the biggest area of concern. But if Caltrans discharge at the top of the watershed is impairing the rest of the reach, it has to be addressed. Remember, this is stormwater, and that this is part of the TMDL. And the reality is that Caltrans is a small part of the overall load in the watershed. And so there are, I'm sure, cases, and I don't want to simplify it too much, where they are causing the impairment all themselves. But in most cases, that's not the case. So keep that in mind also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just if there's a way to call out attention to making sure that's part of the process and lens, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the discussion. And that's really our intent, was to call out that potential concern, but still provide everyone the flexibility to come up with these projects. So I appreciate it. Next slide. Thank you. The second issue that has came to our attention recently comes from our Yuba waterkeeper, who's been witnessing, certainly during the winter months, that highway maintenance, particularly along Highway 80, is allowing the salt settling ponds to fill up before they're able to do their job and actually settle salts. And so what's happening is salt is being directly discharged to the South Yuba River. And this is becoming more and more of a concern for those folks. And so, again, appreciate that it's late in the process. But, you know, I went through the permit, and maybe I missed something, but I didn't see anything really on salt management per se. And there's other things that need to be addressed in particular plans in the SWIP, you know, vegetation control, landslide management. And so our request is to consider adding salt management to part of what they need to address in their SWIP. And then, you know, we can work with the local district to make sure that this specific issue with the settling ponds is addressed properly. Our Yuba waterkeeper felt like, you know, maybe there needs to be a few more, maybe they're not placed exactly in the right spot, or at the very least, there needs to be some more O&M, because they're seeing direct discharges that these BMPs are essentially not working along those areas. So that's our second request. Next slide, please.
And on that, Mr. Bothwell, just to look over to Mr. Bishop, gut feeling on that.
So I don't disagree that salt management is important. You know, I've just been back and forth on the East Coast, and they have lots of little signs up talking about low salt zones on different highways where they want to protect the wetlands. But on this issue, this is an issue of compliance with the requirements in the permit, and the regional board is actually working with Caltrans through enforcement on this issue. And so we don't actually think that it's a needed addition to the permit, since it's already been identified and being addressed through the implementation at Region 5.
Thanks. If anything, helping point to where folks can have a continued discussion with Caltrans around that salt management issue.
Well, let me just pause there for a second. You mentioned Region 5, there's 9 regional boards. So I just would like to better understand actually how that is being addressed on a statewide level.
So it's a discharge of waste, which has to be controlled under the permit. There's a requirement that they control the discharge of waste in their system. The reason I mentioned Region 5 is that Sean mentioned Yuba, and so that's the regional board that's there. In reality, it's not all of our regions have a salt issue. And I couldn't tell you off of the top of my head, but I know it would be Region 5 and Region 6 and probably Region 1 that have that issue, but there may be an additional region. So it's managed under the section in our permit that it requires a waste management plan for any waste that is associated, and maintenance plan associated with that. And so that's where it's controlled. It's already part of that. It isn't a specific requirement for salt, but it is a requirement under their waste management.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was looking through the permit and trying to see, you know, where would the most appropriate place be, and I felt like, yeah, it was captured under there, but since it's not being addressed, at least from what we've been seeing, we thought like a specific call out might be helpful to get Caltrans to address it in a more appropriate fashion. But appreciate the discussion on that too. So this last one, I'm going to admit, I know this is a big ask, but it's a big issue and it's an emerging issue, and we need to do something to start addressing 6 ppd in our watersheds, given the recent science and what's going on. I understand that DTSC is trying to address this, but when they do, it's only going to address new tires and tires that are bought in the state of California. It's not going to address the tires currently on the road. It's not going to address tires from out of state. The science is showing that really one of the main ways to address this, besides source control, is for the existing tires is biofiltration at discharge points where there are salmon-bearing streams. And so, again, I know this is a big one, but I would be remiss if we didn't flag this as a huge issue, given that this is obviously Caltrans stormwater permit. It's going to be around for the next 10 years. This stuff kills salmon within hours. I don't know if we have 10 years to wait to address this through this permit. And DTSC has its own job, but the State Water Board has its job too of maintaining standards to protect biological integrity. So our request is to have a prohibition, given how lethal it is to salmon, and try to require some BMPs to address that issue, particularly in areas where there's salmon-bearing habitat. So with that, I will turn it over to Izzy Coy. And next slide, please.
Well, to keep our pace going,
So much,
Sean, Vice Chair, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you flagging this because this is, I think, an issue that we are tracking already with DTSC. But as far as the biofiltration systems, could you talk a little bit more about those systems and any information that you have about the ability to actually filter out the chemical?
Yeah, I don't have the research in front of me, but what we've been seeing, what we've been reading anyway, is that from studies up in Washington, that's really the way to control it for runoff from roads and tires. Besides source control, obviously that's a huge component. But before they realized what was causing it, they actually knew biofiltration was, getting at this problem of this salmon, die-off syndrome that was happening up in Washington. So I apologize, I don't have all the research in front of me on the biofiltration, but that's what researchers are finding, is that's the one way to kind of control it from roads.
Thanks. And I guess, Mr. Bishop, just a sense on the TTSC process, how long that might take. This is an area that I've been focusing on just because of, the strong science, that we have on this and all of the time that we're spending on these species. So I'm interested in a little bit more on this.
Sure. So generally, the DTSC process is pretty long, and they're in the beginning of it, not near the end. And so I would not expect this to be, a ban on these components in the next couple of years. I don't have their schedule right in front of me, and we would have to consult with them. But I would like to point out a couple of things. Is that I agree with Sean. This is an important issue for us to be looking at. I'm reluctant, actually concerned to say that we need to add biofiltration to every discharge point on a salmon-bearing stream without really the documentation and figuring out, how effective it is, and do we need it at all, or do we need it at some, or is there so if the board is interested in looking further at this issue, I think directing us to work with the Caltrans and the Coast Keepers and see if we can scrape up some money for contracts to figure out how best to approach this. The whole basis for our stormwater permits is that we're not requiring people to retrofit every discharge in the state. And no, though this is not in the state, this is only in certain streams. We need to really understand what that means before I feel comfortable just inserting it in a permit on adoption day. This is I think a very important issue and a big ask. And I would like us to not jump in and lose our ability to address this through a court action, and rather work cooperatively with the folks to figure out what is the best way for us to address it. And so my suggestion would be a direction from the board as part of this adoption to work with Coast Keeper and with Caltrans and with the scientific community and work with Washington State and Oregon State, who have been doing work on this also. As my staff will remind me to say, is that we don't have standards yet. We don't have standard methods. There are lots of scientific issues out there that we need to tackle. But I also don't think that we should just say, we'll consider this at the next option, because that I think is too far off.
And I would just suggest if staff is going to be working on some resolution language to include the regional board, Region 1 in particular.
Yeah. I actually wouldn't suggest it as resolution. I would just suggest it as direction at this point from the board.
Can I follow up on that? Is there monitoring or kind of practical implementation ways that we can flag where there's problems happening now before? I mean, I know the study and the regulatory process, both on our end and DTSC's end, takes a long time, is very deliberative, and we need to do a lot of science. But what's in kind of the short, immediate term can help flag this? Yeah.
This is part of the problem. There are no standard methods for doing this test. So putting it in the permit is problematic. So there isn't really an implementation that says we're going to look at 6 ppd in this runoff. That's why I think it makes sense for us to work with Caltrans and with the scientific community to figure out, okay, can we do a special study that looks at the magnitude and where we're seeing it? Are there different road conditions, different runoff conditions that amplify it or make it less? Can we agree on using a non-standard method for sampling and analysis? All of those pieces that are out there when you're talking about an emerging contaminant that are make it not very amenable to permit conditions. And so that's why I'm suggesting a different approach at this point.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciated the discussion, and I think hearing support from myself, the vice chair, and Laurel, at least, on moving forward with direction here, that we try to pull that together. So maybe at some point we'll have some follow-up. I know this is the permit, so we don't have resolution language to kind of formalize it, but we'll track here. So thank you. Vice
Yeah,
Chair.
I was just going to suggest, because of the importance to have a follow-up, at least the executive director's report. This, I think, is important enough that, to bring it back, maybe information item at some point, at the appropriate point.
That sounds great, and we will get working on that so that we can at least get back to the permit goes into effect supposedly in 1 year. Is that correct? 6 months. So we will try and get back to you with our initial information prior to the effective date of the permit.
Great, thank you.
And if you could include in that, we have our ELAP program. You mentioned there's no standard method. So if you could chat with them and find out what it would take to have one, if they're the appropriate entity to develop that, it would be helpful to know in that report as well.
Will do.
Thank you for entertaining all of that. I know we always have more inquiry and more that we want, but this is an important issue, and we appreciate you bringing it up, Sean.
Yeah, I really appreciate the discussion too. I agree with everything Jonathan said. I don't want to rush into this either. I think it does need to be thoughtfully, but yeah, it is an important issue, and so I really appreciate you guys considering tackling this at some point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Izzy Coy, who's helping us out with Monterey Waterkeeper. She's on the line.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
We can. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you. So I'm just going to jump into pesticides, and there's a couple of ongoing issues that we would like to flag. So firstly, the Laguna de Santa Rosa drains a 254 square mile watershed, parts of which are listed as impaired under Section 303D. The Laguna de Santa Rosa is also the largest tributary to the Russian River. So for the watershed's protection, the local wastewater treatment facility has been assigned a 0 nutrient waste load allocation into the Laguna. As shown on the left side of the slide here, you can see that the Santa Rosa Phase 1 MS4 requires all municipalities to ensure that pesticides are not applied within the MS4. So the issue we'd like to flag here is, as you can see on the map, Highway 101 directly bisects the watershed. And despite this, Caltrans is not bound to that same nutrient waste load allocation, meaning there is an exception there. So we just recommend that Caltrans be held to the same standard as the local municipalities and prohibit spraying pesticides in that MS4. Next slide, please. So we recommend the addition of the text above in red, just establishing a requirement that Caltrans ensure pesticides are not sprayed within the MS4, just to keep the same standard across local municipalities and Caltrans in that area. And again, next slide. Thank you. So the final issue we'd like to flag with pesticides. Well, firstly, we'd like to thank the State Water Board for implementing the requirement that Caltrans has to pick up trash before mowing. That is an enormous step towards cleaner waterways, as trash can no longer be mowed into pieces that are too small to effectively clean up. On a similar note, we now ask that you implement a requirement that trash be collected before pesticides are sprayed. The last thing anyone really needs is loose trash covered in pesticide products and the harsh chemical components. Even if there are teams to come collect the trash after spraying pesticides, the solution of having people pick up trash covered in pesticides is still unideal. And it would seem to make more sense to reduce that possibility of pesticide exposure by removing the trash before pesticides could be sprayed at all. So all we ask is that the language here in red be added and just to require the collection of trash before both mowing and spraying pesticides in an area. Okay, that is it for me, unless anyone has some questions on that.
And yeah, I think there's one more slide, but it's just our thank you slide. And yeah, happy to answer any questions. Really appreciate the discussion and the thoughtful consideration. So thank you.
Thank you as well. Any thought on the pesticide requests?
So I'm going to defer for a second on the TMDL issue and ask staff, because I think there's some issues around, is there a TMDL and is there one for pesticides, and does it make sense to have a prohibition of spraying in a certain watershed where there isn't a TMDL? But I want to take a look, step back a little bit on the second one. I don't think that's I think that's the right thing to do. I think Caltrans already agrees to do that about picking up trash before they spray. But I'm not sure that that's in our stormwater permit on stormwater, and this is not about stormwater. This is about impacting getting pesticides on the plastic. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. I just wonder a little bit if that's in
The nexus. Yeah.
wheelhouse. There is a clear nexus about mowing, and because we're making the particles smaller and easier to transmit to the wastewater. I'd kind of like to have our legal counsel weigh in on that piece before we jump in. And I'd also like for staff to kind of opine a little bit about the pesticide application. I believe that we already require Caltrans to do integrated pest management and not use pesticides unless in a last resort. And so there's already a lot of discussion about where and when you can use pesticides. I'm not sure it exactly addresses this problem, and that's why I'd like to have them weigh in a little bit.
I can respond on the question of, at least on the question of whether that's within our permitting wheelhouse. And I'm not totally sure we've chased this issue all the way down to the ground, but sort of, what we were discussing internally is that we have requirements for control of trash. We have requirements for control of pesticides. We're not necessarily seeing immediately the water quality nexus here in terms of trash with pesticides on it. And I don't have the letter in front of me, but I don't believe the Coast Keeper letter we received made. It was more about, again, the collection of trash with pesticides on it. So again, I'm not sure we've necessarily totally chased it down to the ground, given how recently, we started discussing this, but our immediate reaction was it feels a bit outside of the permits.
And I would make one suggestion that the board might want to ask Caltrans about their protocols when they're speaking.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Good morning. This is Diana Messina with the Division of Water Quality. To speak on, excuse me, incredibly wrong time for your cell phone to go off. To speak on the two other items that Mr. Bothwell and Ms. Coy is bringing up, and that is with the pesticide applications in municipal stormwater systems. That's directly into the storm sewer system. We do have different parties that apply pesticides in different ways. For example, as we started implementing trash devices into our municipal systems, the vector control agencies came forth to work closely with us when we certify trash devices, that there is an access point in those devices. So when necessary, they can spray, because it has been found that in those devices, there are the larvae that's needed to treat for West Nile virus and other diseases. However, I'm not sure if Caltrans directly works with the vector control agencies. I believe that I'd like to hear from Caltrans on that directly and not speak for them. This is an area, however, in their stormwater management plan, if we're really serious about prohibiting them from applying pesticides directly in the system, that we could consider. On the second item, in regards to the TMDL, the Laguna de Santa Rosa TMDL, yesterday we confirmed with North Coast Water Board TMDL staff that the department, that currently that TMDL does not include waste load allocations for pesticides, and the department is not named in that TMDL. However, that board staff, they are working on the development of a pesticide component for that TMDL. They are about 1 year away from having a proposal for a basin plan amendment. And so with that, we look to our permit reopener, in which allows you as the board to reopen the permit as any new or revised TMDLs are established during the permit term. And so we do want to rest on that reopener while the Region 1 board does continue working on that TMDL.
Thank you so much, Ms. Messina. And thank you, Mr. Bothwell and Ms. Coy. We have one more speaker, I believe. Is Shalia Chowdhury with us? Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can, and thank you so much for taking the time and being here with us today.
Thank you. Respected Chair and board members, I'm Shaila Chaudhary, Caltrans Chief Environmental Engineer. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of Caltrans. First of all, I would like to say that Caltrans is committed to environmental stewardship and our effort to improving water quality by complying with the NPDES permit and taking concerted actions throughout the state. We appreciate our long-standing partnership with the State Water Resources Control Board and the 9 regional water boards, and our efforts together in protecting the environment. We also appreciate the many collaborative discussions Caltrans staff have had with the state board staff members over the last couple of years regarding the changes in the 2022 permit. We thank the board staff for their good faith effort in working with Caltrans and finding mutually beneficial resolution when appropriate to ensure viability of permit implementation. We look forward to continued collaboration and support from the state board as Caltrans works on implementing the 2022 NPDES permit. I would like to highlight a few areas where we look forward to closely collaborating with the state board staff in the coming months to ensure Caltrans successfully implements the compliance actions of the 2022 permit. The first item that I would like to mention is our effort to develop acceptable TMDL plans. The NPDES permit requires development of TMDL compliance plans for the 88 TMDLs where Caltrans is a stakeholder. We will be working very closely with the state board and the 9 regional water boards to ensure the compliance plans are accepted and approved by the water boards. We look forward to collaborating with the regional boards regarding the details of the TMDL compliance plans, and we request the state board's support in ensuring timely concurrence from the regional boards and promoting consistency of expectations and requirements to the extent possible across the state. Under the 2013 permit, Caltrans has implemented numerous partnership projects with local municipalities. Under the 2022 permit, we will continue our effort to partner with local municipalities to seize opportunities for partnership projects. These partnership projects allow Caltrans and local municipalities to maximize water quality benefits and fulfill our mutual obligations for TMDL compliance in an efficient manner. We seek the state water board staff support in their approval of waste load sharing and sharing of TMDL and trash credits between local municipalities and Caltrans. Next, I would like to highlight the extensive actions that Caltrans has undertaken to comply with the trash provisions and the trash control requirements of the NPDES permit. Caltrans is proudly implementing Governor Newsom's $1 billion Clean California initiative, a transformative effort to enhance litter cleanup, create jobs, and beautify California. We have increased substantially our litter pickup effort in significant trash generating areas throughout the state. We are partnering with local governments and communities to clean up trash and provide good jobs to thousands of Californians. Caltrans recently also implemented an extensive public education campaign to raise public awareness about the negative impacts of litter and bring about a lasting cultural shift in public behavior related to littering. We look forward to working with the state board staff in securing trash control credits through our enhanced litter cleanup effort as appropriate in significant trash generating areas. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge that the 2022 NPDES permit will increase Caltrans's cost of compliance compared to the 2013 permit. The change from a compliance unit credit system to waste load reduction analysis requirement, the trash control requirements, and the lowering of post-construction treatment threshold from 1 acre to 10,000 square feet will increase the resources needed for compliance. Caltrans and the state board have a vested interest in maximizing water quality benefit economically and efficiently to ensure responsible expenditure of public funds. We look forward to working collaboratively with the state board and its staff members to jointly explore opportunities for effective and economical solutions, promote consistent actions throughout the state, and as always, we are committed to successfully implementing the 2022 Caltrans NPDES permit. So thank you again. Appreciate this opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you, Ms. Chowdhury, for your leadership and Caltrans, just as we've heard, just real embracing of this work. Your stormwater education campaign as well is just well received and incredible and important at this time, to your point, to really raise the consciousness of Californians around littering, but also around the value and need to protect stormwater. And so I just really appreciate the partnership and know that we're here to honestly engage on understanding those costs. And to your point, though, making sure that we are getting the maximum benefit from Californians' resources and dollars here. But also, what I appreciate is there is a common vision and outcome between the agencies, and I know the communities that we serve as well, to not have communities plagued by trash, to have communities that are able to harness stormwater as a resource and continue to make the investments in such fundamental infrastructure in our state in a way that continues to align with our values. And no greater place I feel than in this discussion around stormwater, where we just have a lot of potential still and a lot of opportunity. And so thank you for embracing the project here and here embracing the common vision that I know that we as agencies have amongst ourselves and as Californians as well. And I'm just really proud of this work. So thank you. And any questions from fellow board colleagues at this moment? Okay, thank you, Ms. Chowdhury. Really appreciate it. And maybe actually we do have, as you have heard, we had some back and forth here with the Coast Keepers. And so I think there is some follow-up that we're looking for, particularly around, I believe it was pesticides and the application of them to trash and maybe Mr. Bishop would like to put a finer point as well.
So, Charlotte, one of the questions that was raised was, or concerns was application of pesticides prior to trash pickup along roadways. And my understanding is that the protocols that Caltrans had would be to pick up the trash prior to that. Can you confirm that?
Yes, we have very strong protocols to make sure that we implement best practices to pick up trash before placing any kind of herbicides or pesticides. So I do want to confirm that to make sure that we utilize, we do not place any pesticide or herbicide directly into storm drain systems, so we don't have that protocol. On a limited basis for vegetation management in fire-prone and safety hazard locations, we do utilize approved DPR approved control strategies to make sure that we are appropriately managing the vegetation and mitigating any kind of safety and fire risk.
So I just want to emphasize something and make sure that I heard it correctly. You don't apply pesticides.
No.
So I remember this from the 2012 permit. We actually had a prohibition that we took out because they don't ever use it. But they do apply herbicides where it's necessary to control growth. And so it may be, and I'll ask Sean if he could stand up for just 1 second, and maybe that they were concerned about herbicide application as opposed to pesticide application.
Yeah, so I apologize. These comments were, as I said at the beginning, we were trying to help represent Megan Kahn with Sonoma County Conservation Action. So I wish she was here to kind of help this conversation because we're trying to give her comments. But yeah, I think it was herbicides was the specific concern.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop, and thank you, Ms. Chowdhury, for emphasizing the clarification here, and appreciate that here again, Caltrans doesn't apply pesticides, and it was herbicides, and even in that case, it's on a limited basis where needed for vegetation control, and trash is picked up before spray. So appreciate that, Ms. Chowdhury.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our commenters. Anything further to explore, discuss? Any questions or comments from fellow board colleagues?
I did want to, jump in and add that we have developed some possible language both to address the concern related to cooperative agreements and the direction requested concerning 6 PPD. And if you'd like, I can just go ahead and read both of those here and feel free to
Yeah,
ask
thank you
any
for that,
questions
Mr.
after.
Mallory Jones. Just double checking that there isn't any additional things that any board members are looking for. Okay, great.
Okay, so the first item here is potential language to address Board Member Firestone's request concerning the cooperative agreements and the potential for leaving areas of impairment unaddressed through a cooperative agreement. So I think this would most appropriately go in the cooperative agreement section of the permit, which would be D5.1 in attachment D. And the language we developed would read, when evaluating a cooperative agreement, the regional water board and state water board shall consider potential localized impacts between the Caltrans discharge location and any cooperative agreement projects with a goal of reducing areas of non-attainment. And
Any comments, concerns, agreement on that language?
I think that sounds fine. I keep wanting to figure out how we, I think it sounds good. I'd be fine with that. I keep wanting to figure out how we bring kind of a racial equity disproportionate impact lens into how we're looking at permits. So to the extent that it's possible to reference something related to our resolution on that, or disproportionate impact, that would be helpful. That's the only other thing. But I think that general idea is fine. I don't know if there's a way to add some linkage to that or not.
What I suggest is we go on to the next one, and we might ask for a few-minute break to huddle to see if there's a way. I know what you're getting at, and so
great.
And moving quickly here, the other item concerns Board Member Didamo's request for language directing staff concerning the 6 PPD issue. So here the board would direct staff in coordination with regional water board staff, Caltrans, fishery agencies, and environmental groups to assess options for identifying and addressing 6 PPD Quin 1 discharges to coho salmon bearing streams and report back in a future executive director report.
Vice Chair.
Well, that's appropriate, but I thought that Mr. Bishop, you had said by the time we go to implementation, I mean, I think we'll just make it your call, but whether it's executive director report, I think on something of this level of importance, I'd like to have a discussion about it at the appropriate time, but don't really feel comfortable, giving a specific time. I'm thinking that there might be others that would want to weigh in if we had an information item.
Yeah, I think if we want to change this to an information item, I'm a little less comfortable in saying that we can get that information together to have a real robust discussion in 6 months. I think we can give you a report on what we found in the executive director's month in 6 months, because that'll be whatever we found by then. But if we're going to do a information item, I prefer us to leave that a little bit more open so that at the appropriate time we could bring it back as opposed to a time certain.
I'm fine with that.
And if I can quickly intercede on the D5.1 language to address Board Member Firestone's concern, there is a clause that Mr. Bishop and I were just talking about that could be added to the end of the language that Mr. Mallory Jones read into the record. And recall that the language that was read into the record would have the projects with a goal of reducing areas of non-attainment. The additional additive clause would be and avoiding, so go from reducing to avoiding non-attainment in areas disproportionately impacted by pollutants.
Yeah, so with that change to the change, but with that change read into the record, and then it sounds like for the second one that Vice Chair was just discussing, if we take out some of the specificity, right? In terms of the dates and the executive director report, that's what we're looking at.
I would like just 1 minute to sit down and
Yeah, let's
because
go
I
ahead and
can't do
take,
it off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
yeah. Do you want to take a 10-minute break, come back at 10:50? Or do you need a 5-minute break?
I really think that we can do this in 10 minutes. So let's do it in 10 minutes because it'll take us more than 5.
Okay. You have 9 at this point, if we convene at 10:50. So everyone will take a 9-minute break and reconvene here at 10:50. Thanks.
Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are 2 minutes and 30 seconds earlier than we had requested, which might be the first time ever.
Thank you all for coming under. It's 10:49. Let's go ahead and we can get started.
All right, if nobody else would like to, I'll jump in first and cover modifications or clarifications on those two items. First, regarding the addition of language on cooperative agreements to D5.1, the changes have all been read in, but we want to clarify that it would be placed in the same place that Mr. Bothwell suggested in his presentation, right after following the first full sentence of section D5.1. On the second item concerning 6 ppd Quin 1 discharges, we have modified the direction to read that the State Water Board would direct staff in coordination with regional water board staff, Caltrans, fishery agencies, and environmental groups to assess options for identifying and addressing 6 ppd Quin 1 discharges to coho salmon bearing streams, and to schedule an informational item before the board at the appropriate time.
Great. Colleagues.
I'm happy to make a motion unless. So thanks again so much to staff and Caltrans and stakeholders. A ton of work went into this and really shows that we can be so efficient now in getting this over the finish line. Makes it look easy, even though there's been a lot of years of work. So I'll make a motion to adopt with the changes read into the record. And anything else I need to add?
Change sheet 1.
And change sheet
And then
1.
the motion as requested by Vice Chair Diadamo and stated by Council Mallory Jones.
Fantastic. Is there a second?
And I will be happy to second and also thank everyone for all of the hard work that has gone into this. And, you know, I know that the work doesn't stop, so I definitely appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, board members. Ms. Townsend, can you please call a roll call vote?
Yes. Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Aye.
Board Member McGuire.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, disembodied clerk of the board. The vote carries and the vote is unanimous and the item is passed. Thank you, everyone. Again, as board member Morgan said, a lot more work to do now, but incredible and significant milestone. And so just thank you. Congratulations. That brings us to the end of item number 10 and brings us to the end of our 2-day board meeting. Just want to thank everyone. We actually do not have a board meeting in 2 weeks. That board meeting has been canceled. The one item we were going to have was moved off. And so better so that everyone has some time off now for that week. Instead, we will be here July 19th next at our board meeting. And until then, anything missing before we close on?
Can hold for 1 second. I just want to check one thing. I'm sorry.
Of course.
Is there a workshop on Wednesday the 6th? No?
No.
Okay. What? I have an adoption hearing. Okay.
Sorry, just want to make sure we leave everyone with.
Forward on that. So where do we have it? Yeah. I just want to be what council has pointed out is the way that the item appeared in the agenda and the way the motion was stated was that member Firestone was moving the staff proposal with the change sheet and the various items read into the record. And while it may not be entirely clear from the agenda, the staff proposal is both the order, the NPDES permit for Caltrans, as well as the accompanying time schedule order. So I just want to be clear, doesn't need to be a vote, but I want the record to accurately reflect the staff proposal includes both those orders.
On item number 10, yes, thank you. And in that case, we'll see you then July 19th And until then, everyone stay safe, be well, and thanks so much for your time and engagement. See you soon. This meeting is adjourned.